This is an old ass man versus a young ass man podcast.
In New Jersey.
Yeah, beautiful part of New Jersey.
Oh, this is what's this? Lebanon, New Jersey?
Lebanon.
And that's next. I went to a small town coming in here. I saw some antique
Trump town.
shops. No.
No.
Well, Trump is right down the street, right? Trump's golf course is right down the street.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're here with Gary, and the reason why we have Gary on our podcast is because Gary comes from a very, very interesting background. One, Gary is Jewish, right?
Yeah.
And we're black, obviously, so that means nothing. But the point of us having this conversation with Gary is because we are friends. And when I first met Gary, he asked me the question, how come black athletes go to these racist ass schools?
Yeah.
That was the beginning in the South.
I didn't even know that.
That was our first
question.
That was our first conversation.
I would ask my friends, why do they let their kids go to, like, Mississippi State, which has the rebel flag up there, their racist ass shit. I'm allowed to curse.
You can curse, say whatever the fuck you want.
And anyway, it always pisses me off. I can't believe it. Why would a black kid go play at schools that pay homage to people who traded this country, that slave traded, that dehumanize people, and on and on and on. I just don't understand. I still don't understand.
Well, scholarships.
You can get a scholarship right here at Rutgers University, one of the best schools in the United States. Any good athlete, believe me, they'll give them a full scholarship and they'll get 10 times the education at the 16th best rated college, university in the United States. Then they'll never get the University of Mississippi. No offense to the University of Mississippi, but shame on you.
Well, the reason why I said to Gary is because of circumstance. Most young black athletes come from a background where it's either a single family home or it's their shot to get out of their community
Survival.
or to change the trajectory of their family
That's
lineage.
true. Look, education really is the way out of tough urban areas. And you need a lot of luck. And there's nothing wrong with using your athletic skills. I only wish I was as quick as some of the black kids. Used to run circles around me. Sorry, I used to beat the shit out of them with my elbow.
You definitely have to tell us about that. But one of the other reasons why we're sitting talking with Gary is because Gary, about, what is it, maybe 4 months ago?
Oh yeah, drop dead.
Gary, 4 months ago, literally died.
I did.
He had a major heart attack.
No.
And
My heart stopped for 31 minutes.
Yeah, so your heart stopped for 31. No,
Right.
Please tell us what
31
happened.
minutes. My wife we were messing around. I want this out in the public. And I stood up in the middle of messing around and I said, Colleen, something is wrong. And I apparently fell flat on my face. There was blood all over. Colleen, my wife, knows CPR. And she started giving me CPR. And it wasn't working. And she started screaming. Thank God she did. You like that? Thank God.
That's right. We'll talk about that later.
Anyway.
With the Lord.
A guy came in, and when you do CPR, you got to break people's ribs. I had 7 ribs or 8 ribs broken. Wow. And for 31 minutes, from what I was told, my wife got on the phone with our son, who's a 4th-year medical student, and he's kind of crying and talking things through with Colleen. Colleen's crying. I know nothing what's going on. And they put me in a ambulance, and they decided to hit me up with epinephrine, and they got a heartbeat. To cut through the stuff, they put me in what's called a cold, what do they call it? Coma. And the reason they were doing that is to see if my brain would ever function again, because your brain, when you die, lasts for about 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. That's why people sometimes have mystical experiences.
Right.
You don't die. But they didn't think I have any brain left. From what I understand, one of my biggest fears in life was a respirator, especially with COVID, because respirators are very hard to control. And with COVID, I mean, a lot of people don't realize it. It's a very uncomfortable thing unless they can. It's like a trifecta. You gotta have your lungs pumping at a certain level. At the same time, you have to be knocked out, but you can't be too knocked out. So it's a complicated. It's a very. And I was on a respirator. I didn't know anything about it. All I know is I was talking to my son. Colleen and my son would take turns in the ICU unit. I just started remembering a little because I have no memory for 3 weeks. Literally, picture going to bed one night, waking up 3 weeks later, and thinking it's 24 hours later. I mean, I knew something was wrong because I was in pain and stuff like that. But I really have no memory of 3 weeks. When I started remembering, my son, I was talking to him how much I hated Donald Trump, Black Lives Matter, and this poor nurse. I called her the Italian Stallion because she was originally from, I think, South Philly. And apparently I drove her nuts.
Right.
And I started wailing with my hands and feet, so they knew I was starting to develop motor skills. Next thing I know, which was really the strangest feeling I ever known, I almost died in there because when your heart stops, your lungs fill the fluid. And there's something called the death chant, which a lot of people die. Unfortunately, I've had that experience. You're gargling to death. You go, because all the fluid's in there. I don't know how they got it out. They come back, go back. Anyway, I made it. I wake up, Colleen's going, and I had this warm feeling. You'll like this, very godly. Colleen says,
he's
squeeze.
Everybody.
We debate religion.
Yeah, all the time.
Okay. My wife says to me, squeeze my fingers. My brain knew what to do, but my hands couldn't do it. But I felt some real nice peace. I felt the kind of peace because I saw my wife. I remember seeing some of the kids because we have 8 of them. And the next thing I know, they had me on a drug called ketamine, which is like LSD, but not with the hallucinations. It elevates you. That's why they put you on it, because they know they think you're going to be depressed, which I never was. I don't know why. And then they block him and I debate religion every other time.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Anyway, at that point, then I was on Oxycontin, which was a lot of fun, and Dilaudid, another drug, because I had 8 broken ribs, which was the hardest thing.
Yeah.
I told him, the doctor came in, Colleen wasn't there at this one point, and the doctor goes to me, which made me feel really good. He goes, Gary, you're one tough dude. There's like 8 different people there. There's like a shadower that watches, this learning medicine. Then you have a resident, an intern, all these medical people. And he says it to me. I felt so good, but I have no idea why, because I felt so shit. Wow. I was in pain. And I said, I want to walk. And when I started walking, I wanted to scream because I didn't realize how painful it was. With the ribs, you have to excuse me, people, I'm blowing my nose. And anyway, subsequently, we eventually went home, and Colleen was driving, and I was trying to be very stoic. Every time she hit a bump, I didn't want her to, because she would feel bad. She kept looking over at me, and I go, oh, God, the poor girl. And my wife was absolutely, I'm not just saying that, she was just wonderful. At night, I couldn't get up to go to the bathroom, and they had me catheterized for those couple of weeks. And if you want to go to the bathroom after you've been catheterized for 3 weeks or whatever it was the most painful thing. But more painful was even getting up from the bed. My wife's 105 pounds. She's trying to lift me on 220. It was a very interesting experience. She's pushing me from the back and everything. Eventually, here I am. And it's good to be alive. Martin said a lot of prayers for me. Anyway.
Well, I do remember, if I'm not mistaken, either the first or second time when I was with you when you got the phone call.
Yeah, you were with me.
From his wife to say what was going on. Excuse me. It was a scary time.
I didn't realize this until Colleen was telling me, which really touched my heart, that you guys were going to come down and see me. I didn't even know at the time.
Yeah.
But Donald and I have been friends in our family for a while, and I can't believe he was going to come down and see me.
Yeah, I was literally going to drive down.
I love you
to DC.
I seriously do.
Absolutely.
And it really meant a lot to me. And that was it. And here I am. I'm alive, and I'm back to fighting with the world.
Fighting with the world?
Yeah.
So it's not that we're here. That's one of the reasons.
That's one of the reasons why we're here.
But the main reason is because we want to know your life. What have you done to this point? How has this changed your life? But what do you do? What is your business? What do you do? What do you do
That's
other than,
actually a good
you
question.
see what I'm saying?
No, what happened is...
It's very interesting what you do.
I grew up in the 1960s. I'm a product of the 1960s.
Where'd you grow up? Where?
Irvington, outside of Newark.
Oh, that's...
Okay.
Is that like a ghetto or something?
No, it's a multicultural area.
Okay.
And a tough area.
Yeah, right, right.
A low working class area. But Newark was the heart of everything,
Right.
because all the movie theaters were there and everything. I grew up like most normal kids. I'd walk out of my house, there'd be 1,000 kids to play ball with. Mm-hmm. But interesting stories, since you guys are black, that had a big impression upon me. One of my friends was a guy named Reggie, and his father was the only black guy. At 4 o'clock, they'd have a whistle. Lionel Trains was 1 block away from me.
Oh, wow.
And they would pull the whistle. Ooh, everybody had to clear the streets to the cars. Everybody's walking down the street with their black metal things. And Reggie's father, I always saw him because he was black, and we'd be playing. I just settled on because I was friends with his son. And he owned the house. The guy worked 3 jobs, and I remember he smoked Chesterfield cigarettes, non-filtered, which was very common, especially in the black community. They always seemed to smoke the worst kind of cigarettes.
Yeah, menthol.
No, even before the menthols came out.
Before that?
Pall Mall, it was like the worst. I always, it was a very big distinction in my head.
Right.
Because they seemed to peddle more in the black community.
Yes.
The shit cigarettes.
That's
no, they really did.
Well, that's been on the news recently.
Really?
Yeah, the menthol.
The menthol's most...
So
yeah.
I went to get Reggie because we were going up the block to play stickball. And he could hit. Mm-hmm. I never forgive him. He beat my ass all the time. But anyway, his dad was sitting on the steps smoking a Chesterfield, and his wife comes out, and I think his name was John. Hey, John, we're behind in the car insurance, and we're behind in the mortgage a month. And what hit me, I was about 10 years old, is when you're poor, you have to make tough choices in life. And the tough choice was, do I pay the mortgage and go without car insurance? I would have made the same decision now that I'm older. But I would watch Judge Judy on TV, and she's always yelling at people because they don't have liability insurance. Forget property insurance. But when you're piss poor, you can't afford it. Right. And I started realizing for the first time an awareness of what the word survival really meant. Mm-hmm. And this was a guy who worked 3 jobs. He owned the house, okay? But the guy busted his ass, and he always would chastise us. You boys be good. That's all I remember saying. And he was a kind of intimidating guy. And I'd say, yes, sir. All that. We go play ball, and that was it. But that was my first awareness. My second awareness when it came to race, my mother had a woman that cleaned our home once a month. She would come in for half a day because that's all my parents could afford. Mm-hmm. And she was African-American. And my mother, I'll never forget this, I was little. My mother found out she had a degree from actually Howard University. Mm-hmm. And at that time, which was the Harvard of the black community, right. Howard. And it's actually, still is. But it's very integrated now.
Yeah, it is, right.
Anyway, but Howard's part of the old chain of like North Carolina, AT&T, mm-hmm. Florida State, and all those.
All the black colleges.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they were the heart and soul besides the church of the black community. Mm-hmm. And I remember my mother found out. She stopped her right then and there. She said, she's not cleaning my house. You're going to be a teacher. And she told my mother, and I was sitting, our house was so tiny. I lived in my parents' bedroom. And I was like sitting at the edge of my bed. And I heard my mother say that. My mother was so furious. She got the lady a job. It took her months in Newark teaching. Mm. But no one would hire her, she was telling her, because she was black. My mother was a fighter.
What year was this, Gary?
I must have been 10 years old.
So what year was
that? So
that?
I'm 70, going to be 73, 1959 maybe.
Okay.
And my parents were my father had a flee in World War I. They took him out of his home in the middle of the night with his brother because they were Jewish. Everybody thinks because of the Nazi movement, it started way before that. I mean, Jews were kicked out from one country to the other. There's always been a love-hate relationship between Jews and the African-American community because during the Civil Rights Movement, Jews fled the cities after the riots because they owned the stores. Right. So the African-American community hated the Jews. At the same time, Jews really fought hard for African Americans because they had something in common: hate. And so there was always this symbiotic relationship that was also bifurcated.
Hate and
Who
being
was it?
oppressed.
Was it Martin
Yeah.
Luther King? Martin Luther King and the Jewish gentleman that he was with for so many years. He's in the African American Museum. I can't remember.
You know what I found out recently? My daughter was telling me about Armstrong.
Louis Armstrong?
Louis Armstrong was raised by a Jewish family, and he wears a Jewish star.
Okay.
Yeah, down in New Orleans, because no one would do anything. His story is so amazing. No one really studies Black history.
Right.
But his struggle is amazing. And this Jewish family took him in, and I don't know, they raised him and everything.
What was it like growing up in your household?
Well, my parents, we never heard. We were always taught that everybody, no matter who, like my friend Reggie, if I didn't call him Mr. So-and-so, my father would have kicked my ass. We had to show respect no matter who anybody was. And my father would tell me, I don't care who they are, what they are, you show respect. I would go to them because my dad was in the vending machine business. We'd go into Black neighborhoods, and I'd go into a bar. If I didn't say Mr. So-and-so, his foot would have been up my ass because he just was like that. Because of what my father went through and the way my mother thought, there was a kind of synergy that I was raised. It was to change the world. I'll start crying thinking about it. But so I was 14 and a half years old. I went to the March on Washington. My parents were terrified that I would do it. And I did it, and I slept in my sleeping bag right below the Washington Monument.
Wow.
But you had to kind of, I stayed to the right. Every time I go down to Washington, I always look and think back. No one bothered me. The next day, I'm sitting in a pool of people. This little kid, I took a bus, but my parents didn't stop me. They were scared.
At 14 years old?
14 and a half. Because remember, I grew up in a city.
Right.
You know, people that don't grow up, so we grow up faster when you're in a city.
Right.
You know, you live in my kind of area, you don't grow up. You know, it's a big difference.
Right.
And it was just accepted. And then I remember crying and listening to him. And it had a very profound impact on me. I said I was going to make a difference.
It's all right.
That's
That's
all
good.
right. It's good.
And I did. I got arrested 7 times during the 1960s between the war and the civil rights movement. I was in graduate school. I got kicked out of Monmouth University. I wound up transferring to NYU because of the things I did. And I never regretted it.
What were some of the things that you did?
And why?
You sit in, so you know, you take over a building, you sit in. We didn't hurt anybody, but you have, you know, there's always been a struggle.
Protest, right?
Yeah, but protest is a very loose word. You know, I kind of grew up with Gandhi and Martin Luther King. I actually read them to understand what they were saying. And
But why do you feel so? Why you cried? Why do you feel so passionate about it? What do you think?
because I saw pain. I told Donald the story. I was down in Washington in front of the FBI building, and people probably don't believe this, but back then they would bring in the cops from Virginia when there was a protest. The DC police are very different today. Mm-hmm. First of all, half of the DC police department is black.
Right.
And there was a guy, I could see his face. I was standing, we were across the street, and it was just a huge row of people. I don't know how many were there. And this guy said I was an N lover. And this big black dude, he must have been like 6'5", the guy came over and clubbed me.
Wow.
And I never felt
that. A white guy?
Yeah, he was a racist. He was talking so openly in front of these other cops. And he came right for me because I was a white kid standing next to these two black. There were a lot of other white people there, but for some reason he went after me. And this big black dude, man, he grabbed me. He was, "Come here, little brother," and he dragged me. And I had blood coming down. I got hit over here, but I don't know where the blood. I always think it probably came from here, but I never forgot it. And you see hate like that, changes you.
Changes you. Wow.
So,
That's deep. That's deep.
So where did your parents get that from? Can we go back a little bit? Like, so
I don't know. All I know, my parents, when I think about them, they always told me never to be afraid of an idea. That's where religion came in.
Right.
I challenged everything. I challenged the very premise of my life. I became a thinker. And I know it sounds arrogant, but I really am a thinker. I'm a very big critical thinker. And I always started thinking about like the origins of life, human sexuality, why the human family can't get along. And I just started reading, and I don't know. And I was always a leader. And I knew that. I knew I could have influence on people, and I did.
do you think with your parents' influence and then the stuff that you read and the stuff that you experienced kind of made you a revolutionary kind of person, or have that kind of mindset?
I was a member of a group, probably scare people, Students for Democratic Society. I wasn't a member of what they call the Weathermen that did the bombing, but the creed of the Students for Democratic Society, you should study it, where people that really were, look, I believed in pluralism. To this day, with my heart and soul, as much as I find so much hatred even in our own country, I know this is the best hope for mankind because we're the melting pot. And if America doesn't succeed, the rest of the world's not going to succeed. The human family has to figure out a way to get along. And I was lucky to marry a girl who thought very much like me. And that was really key, too. And I'm not just saying it because we share a lot of our same things. And I don't know, there's something self-righteous about me, which is hard to say, but I hate people who hate. I just do. And I just stand up. I
don't think that's self-righteous. I think that's righteous indignation.
I'll go on with that.
So for everybody who's going to listen to this, Gary is, even though he is raised Jewish in his background, he is a atheist. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so Martin and I, we're both Christians, but Martin and Gary more so go at it when it comes to the faith.
And Donald sends me at least once a week a passage from the Bible, and I do read, and it's always to send me a message. And they're long. I gotta read it because Donald's sending it to me.
You read the whole thing.
They've been trying to convert me for a long time.
No.
We believe that everything happens for a reason, that there are no mistakes. You know, the fact that you met your wife, the fact that you're still here physically, the fact that we're sitting together right now, I don't think it's by accident.
I like to tell my Christian friends, the last Jew that died got resurrected, and I tell my Christian friends my first order is to help the poor. I don't know how many are listening to me, but another Jew died and came back. Everybody thinks I have these.
You see what I got to deal with?
Every time Martin and I get together, we have these philosophical battles.
It's okay. It's all right. It's all right.
But you have a unique view on it, which I have to. You still critically.
Well, I try to put God in the culture, directly into the culture. So everything that you talk about, I try to add that in. Like what you just said about what happened, we weren't there back in those days, but I remember my mother telling me stories that you had just said about being in the walk of Washington and being in D.C. in those days and having to deal with it, and from a woman's perspective. So I hear what you're saying. So much compassion, though. I just
The black woman's perspective.
My mom was probably the kindest human being I have ever met. She always, you know those little stereotypes of Jewish mothers. There used to be a program called Rhoda.
Yeah, I remember Rhoda.
Okay.
Yeah,
right, all the shows.
Yeah, I remember Rhoda. Yeah.
Rhoda's mother was like my mother in a way. You know, they always like to give you guilt. My mother's, Gary, you got one foot in the grave. Do you want to put the other one in? And I was like the little one at this point. It didn't. It had no effect on me. I was listening to it for years from my brothers and sisters. It's called Jewish guilt. But I have that feeling there's black guilt, Catholic guilt. But
All types of guilt.
Yeah.
Human guilt.
But she had so much human compassion for people. And she was such a fighter, and she really was. And they taught me. I'm not. You can't say you're colorblind because I know you guys are black. I mean, I'm white. It's just the way they raised me. That there's a greater. You're gonna love this one. There's a greater good other than yourself. and that's very biblical. But that my parents weren't religious. At least my mother was, and we were raised with the idea that everybody had rights and they should get them no matter. And I remember them sitting with me the night before I went. It was actually 2 days before I went down to Washington, and she said to me, "I know we're not." Because I was kind of a rebel, you couldn't stop me. But they weren't gonna, and they just said, "We're scared to death, but we know it's a righteous cause." And they really felt that way. And they did try to stop me because they were fearful for my safety. But in the end, it didn't. And when I was getting arrested, my name would be, and picture would be in something at the time called the Newark Evening News, which is the forerunner to what was the largest newspaper in New Jersey, the Star Ledger. My parents stood up for me.
I remember Star Ledger's still around.
I think so. I think it's so.
Yeah. Now they do it digitally.
Internet came through. I used to read Star Ledger in the morning.
New Jersey, yeah. But it used to be the ninth largest paper in the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they just taught, there was, look, we didn't have a lot, but there was love and education was everything. We were always, they used to sit there and say, don't be afraid of an idea, like I told you. Mm-hmm. And so you challenge that. We would sit and have the most amazing conversations at dinner.
Will you guys have debates?
Oh my God, yeah, everything. We talked about anything from sex to religion. My parents were very open like that. They really were. And I don't know, all this stuff shapes you. Like in the 1960s, a lot of things shaped me too. I mean,
But did it shape you to be a leader? Now, we're not going to talk too much about business, but in your business, was your mother more influenced in your life? And did it shape you to be the businessman
I
that
used
you are
to
today?
think, can I tell you something?
Gary's a good businessman.
I always made a joke
We're not talking
out
about
of
business, but he's a man.
Okay. I always make a joke about this, but I honestly think it's true. When you're Jewish, I think they play a tape recorder in your ear when you're little and tell you got to work for yourself. You got to work for yourself. Be an entrepreneur. I swear.
So is that something that they used to do in your head when you were little?
Because that's what is that? That's a stereotype.
But it's true
when it comes to Jewish people.
Can I tell you something?
Right.
But it's true. The history of the Jewish people, they were part of the mercantile class of Europe, and even though they got thrown out of every freaking country, and when they did, the economy suffered. And the stereotype is true. Every culture has stereotypes. Some are unfair, some are real. My mother was partly Rhoda's mother. That's the stereotype. That's the way it is.
Watch Rhoda. Look up Rhoda. Check it out. It's a good show.
Yeah, I don't know what Rhoda is.
Rhoda, Maude, all those shows.
I'm not that old as they are, so
But it shaped. It shaped you.
No, it did. We raised our kids I'll tell you stories about our kids that always blow my mind. One of our sons, he has computers, and obviously
how many kids do you have?
8.
8 kids. 8 kids between the both of you.
You guys are getting busy out here.
God, we're down to our last one in the house. But I'll tell you stories that I always, during 9/11, one of our kids was at Rutgers, and they were picking on this Muslim girl. And my son went to sit next to her to protect her. And he's gay. And he's not, he's muscular, 6'5" guys, but his empathy was there. Our other son, thank God we've done well. You like that one? Thank God.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. You said it. I didn't say it. You said it.
Anyway, he gets like a new keyboard or something. He had friends in Canada and one in Idaho. They didn't have money. He would come over and to one of us and say, "Can I send this?" They don't have it. He would send it. He gave away literally a big computer once to one of the kids. I said, "Go ahead," because he just felt sorry for him, and he's very appreciative. We have our young daughter that you guys know, Kylie. Besides loving his kids so much, she loves kids. I don't know why, but she does. Maybe because she's a pain in the ass herself. Anyway, she has such a fight in her about injustice. I mean, I know that comes from us because we talk about it a lot. But there's a lot of the kids. They're very compassionate and giving, and that's one thing I think we did really well. You can criticize us for a million things, but not that. I really think they got good hearts. And it's the same way I think I was raised in everything. And Colleen and I, try to impart it upon our kids because another biblical, to go out and multiply. So the kids go out and multiply, and they'll make the world a better place. That book, the Make a Village by Hillary Clinton, I didn't read it. But the concept is right. It takes a lot of people to help people. And, you need a community. You step in and you try to do things. I know this sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm not. Like Colleen and I, there's a food pantry where families live. They lose their houses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And every Christmas we sit here with 1 million presents for the kids because we can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have it as a kid. I would get one present
Mm-hmm.
for Hanukkah, which is the equivalent of Christmas for lack of a better thing.
Right.
And Colleen, I said, Gary, there's something wrong about this picture. And we'd be sitting there, our family room's full of presents. So one year I went over there. And then again, I got it in my car and I cried. It was very hard.
Right.
Nice families, all black, white, Spanish, everything were in there. And they lived there. And they had little kids. And so one day I said, find out what these kids want. Let them make a list, never knowing they make lists like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like 15, 16, 17 kids. Some of the kid would be 2 years old, the others would be 17. The one thing all the older kids asked for was a credit card to buy food. Survival.
Wow.
Survival. Okay. And then other kids, they'd ask for books to read. The little kids asked for trains. Anyway, because we could afford it, we got all the kids everything they wanted. But one of the things we did that I thought was very good on our part, they wanted me and Colleen to give the presents to the kids. I said, no, we'll give the presents.
And the kids give the presents to the kids.
No. Give it to the parents. They had nothing.
Oh.
So I said, we're not going to be there. You let those parents, and we've done this every year. And I don't know about you, on Christmas, I just feel very Christmassy, very giving.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me, I don't know, when I do something good like that, it makes me feel good about myself. I remember when I was a kid with Jerry Lewis's telethon. He grew up in Irvington, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
My dead mother was his girlfriend, which is interesting.
Okay.
He got thrown out of school too.
I do have a question for you. So coming from two things, coming from it seems like humble beginnings, like your parents didn't have a lot of money, right? But I do have to ask the question because inquiring minds will want to know.
Sure.
If your parents didn't have money, how were you guys able to afford a nanny?
We didn't have a nanny.
Oh, like
we just had that one lady. She came in for 3 hours.
Right.
On
And
a
she would, like,
Wednesday.
clean.
Yeah, clean. I remember it was just 2 bedrooms, a little foyer, and a little
And he slept in
kitchen.
his mom's room.
Every time my parents messed around when I was older,
had to hear it?
I listened to it.
Well, you
That's why you have 8 kids.
This is terrible.
Man,
What we
like,
said,
they
this
weren't-
is terrible.
besides having an active sex life, they did love each other. They were like 2 dogs in the heat.
But this, my second question is:
Yes.
since you came from nothing, how did
Wow.
what inspired? Well, since you came from nothing, how did you get to where you are now? And then what inspired you to get back from that?
My parents, I wanted to go to Israel because I romanticized Israel because of what they call the kibbutz.
What's a kibbutz?
A kibbutz is like where people, for the common good, they'll grow their food. It's a commune for life. That's how Israel actually really started. And my parents said, my parents knew if I went, I wouldn't come home. I didn't know that, but then I wanted to join the Peace Corps. And then they said, what are you doing? You got to develop something for your future so you can help people. So I applied to law school. Thank God I got into law school. I didn't want to be a lawyer, but I wanted to spend a couple of years because of where I grew up. I actually, before I worked in the state prisons in New Jersey, Trenton and Rahway, actually was in Annandale, prison. My job was to get people who were getting out of jail jobs. Mm-hmm. So I started with $7,000 temporary help company. I never worked in the industry. I spent a year. My parents used to say, you can be anything you want, just go to the library. And there's truth to it. I would go to the library literally every day I'd leave work. I'd study what to do. And I just did it. And I remember my first year, I made $1,200 and I was making $85 a week, and I cleared $72.19. And there were times I would go to the gas station with 35 cents, embarrass this house, they give me 35 cents. I had to do it.
Right.
I ate a lot of spaghetti. I was getting sick of it, let me tell you. God bless Italians, and they like to eat spaghetti every day. God bless.